when the grandmother of the great Prussian King Frederick the Great, Sophie Charlotte, who was a very enlightened, very wise woman. She was the initiator of the first Academy of Sciences, and she let build a palace here, far away from the eventual city premises. This is where we go, Charlottenburg. This is where the rise of Prussia started. Her husband, who was an Elector prince, I mentioned yesterday that there was always 7 most important princes, German princes, who always had the right to elect who would be the next German emperor. That's why they were called the Elector princes. So this is the Elector Prince Avenue leading to Charlottenburg, which used to be a hunting lodge, and there was a hunting path some 300-400 years ago, not like an elegant avenue nowadays. And that Elector Prince, the husband of Sophie Charlotte, decided that he is confident enough to declare himself the king, to declare himself king. Before he was a duke, and he became a king. He crowned himself. It's interesting. Nobody elected him. He elected himself, and he was crowned not in Berlin, because Berlin was a small settlement that time, but in Königsberg, which is today Kaliningrad. Today belongs to Russia, to the Russian Federation. It's a small Russian enclave on the Baltic coast. But the the map of Europe looked completely differently than today. So at that time, what is today Russia, Russian town Kaliningrad, was the capital of Prussia, is this German state.
Of the Berlin blockade. In 48-49, the Russians, or the GDR, had the idea of incorporating this little island of West Berlin into their territory, and so they decided to cut off all access roads and basically cut off the Berliners from food. I mean, Berlin is a big city, there's no agriculture, the people have to eat, and if the roads and the waterways are blocked, no food can be taken into town. What they didn't expect was that it would be done by aeroplane. So that was the famous time of the Berlin airlift, when Berlin for 11 months was provided with everything they needed by air, by aeroplane. And yeah, that was the time when this guy, the square circle was named after, was mayor, and he very much supported Berlin. And eventually the whole thing was turned down, and the Russians gave up, and West Berlin stayed an independent, free city. That is something that was never forgotten in Berlin, and still in days of difficult political situations, and not everybody is in political line with what happens in the US at the moment. We are still very fond of the Americans here. We are still very, very thankful, grateful, thankful for what was done, and the West Berliners know definitely that they own their independence, the Americans mainly. Look straight down ahead, you see a lot of high-rises. All of them are brand new. You can hardly spot the Emperor William Memorial Church, the Gedächtniskirche. A lot is happening at the moment in the western part of Berlin. And these two high-rises, one is the Waldorf Astoria, the first and only one in Germany. The other one is a Motel One, quite cheaper, both are hotels. They were built only recently. The Motel One was only completed at the beginning of this year. 300,000 different products, can you believe it? So it's the second biggest department store in Europe, second only to Harrods in London. They open only at 10, so they're still closed. The most favorable, or the best known floor of the 7 floors they have is the 6th one. That's the food and deli floor. And I like to tell you a few more numbers. If you go to the 6th floor, you can choose for example, between 350 different types of bread and rolls, 1,200 different types of meat and sausages, 1,300 different types of cheese, and 4,500 different bottles of wine. So really they offer everything and anything. And they really try also to make the shopping experience easy for you. Just to give you an example, if you have a dog, of course you can't take the dog up to the food and deli floor. But in the basement is a parking garage, and in the parking garage you find special dog crates where you can leave your dog while you go shopping. Yeah, it's a wonderful experience, and you can leave a lot of money there, that I can promise you. Ahead of us to the left, by the Berliners, without any political meaning of course, we call it the Titanic. Many embassy buildings to the left. Interesting, the Embassy of Mexico, you can see that to the left now. The facade looks a bit like it would open up and tilt. Then the Scandinavian embassies, the 5 Scandinavian embassies built a joint new embassy building for themselves, and of course it contains a sauna. Finland is one of the Scandinavian embassies. And this whole area here south of the Tiergarten of the main park is called the embassy or the diplomatic quarter. We carry on now straight towards the Victory Column. The Victory Column is another landmark of Berlin, and the column was put up here after after Germany as a country was founded. Germany is a relatively young country. I'm not going to bother you with too many history dates and years, but some I need to mention. In 1871, Germany was founded as a country, and of course that happened after a lot of wars were won. Prussian army fought against Austria, Denmark and France. And if we approach the column now, have a look at the golden objects that are attached to the column. You might not be able to see it now, but when we get closer you can see what they are. They are barrels of cannons. They are original parts of cannons, spoils of war. Or as I like to say, these armies, they behaved like children. They took away the toys of the others and cut off the barrels of the cannon, fire gilded them, added a golden wreath, and then they attached these barrels to the Victory Column. And of course on top is the goddess of victory, or Nike as the Greeks call it. And the goddess of victory, she looks towards the west. Why towards the west? This is where France is located. And you can imagine that the French people are not really mad about this column. They don't really like it. And when the French army eventually had the chance to get to Berlin, and that was after the end of the Second World War, they wanted to blow up the whole column. Luckily, Berlin was at that time already divided into occupation zones, and this was the British occupation zone, and apparently the British don't like the French either, so they would not allow it. This is why Victory Column is still here. Look to the right, there's Brandenburg Gate. Now you are orientated. We'll get there soon. That will be our next stop, but before we get there, we will pay a visit to our state president. And very symbolically, you can see to the right now, 2 bridges connect 2 buildings, and the government district spans over the river. Some buildings of the government district are located in the former eastern part of Berlin, connected with 2 bridges. So that means that the politicians work nowadays in both halves of the formerly divided city. Very symbolic, I think a brilliant idea to show that Berlin is reunified. We are right on the former border. Everything ahead of us is former East Berlin. We will cross again several times, and we must not forget, we just cross, we don't think about it anymore nowadays. Until 1989, this was impossible. You as American citizens, you would have had to cross at Checkpoint Charlie, Me, as a West German citizen, I would have had to cross at other checkpoints. I had to show my passport, and for Berliners to cross over in the East was almost impossible. They had to obtain some kind of a visa just to cross the road. Impossible to grasp, but that was reality for 28 years. You can hardly see the difference between East and West nowadays anymore. There are a few dead giveaways, I will tell you about that later, but it's almost difficult to see. We will turn right now, but please have a look to the left. There's a quite interesting statue. What we see is a muscular, good-looking, naked man. We only see him from behind, but anyway, not too bad. And he is about to strangle a wild animal. And the wild animal represents tuberculosis. Depicted is Rudolf Virchow, and he was a physician at the Charité, at the main Berlin hospital, which is behind the statue. It's a huge area, all the buildings belong to it. And yeah, he fought against tuberculosis at the turn of the last century very successfully. So he strangled the tuberculosis. I really like this sculpture. We turn right and we will again see more of the government district. turn left now because Paris Square is pedestrianized. But you will see on top of Brandenburg Gate is the quadriga, a chariot, the goddess of victory on 4 horses, and the whole statue that you will see soon after her long journey. Left of Brandenburg Gate is the American Embassy. You will see that better from the other side. And also, if you look at Paris Square now, it's quite beautiful. You must not forget, all the buildings are brand new. Only Brandenburg Gate survived the war. All other buildings were built after the war. On the left, you can see a building with a red entrance and red windows. And this is Madame Tussauds, the wax cabinet, the wax museum. The original one is in London, but there are a lot of branches all over the world. I like the Berlin one, and of course we display here our local celebrities. And you know what happened on the opening day 7 years ago? Something that should have happened 80 years earlier. Hitler was decapitated. Yes. So what happened? One of the first visitors ran into the museum. He pushed a security guard away. He ran to the museum, and with his foot he kicked off Hitler's head. Well done, I would say. Unfortunately, he was sentenced not for destroying Hitler, but for pushing away the security guard. But anyway, that started a long discussion. Is it actually acceptable that we display Hitler in a museum? Can we do that? Or maybe, do we have to do that? I mean, he was at least an interesting and important figure in German history. Yeah, after a long discussion, we came to terms with it, and we glued the head back on his body, and he is again on display. But he's tucked away. All other wax figures stand freely in the museum. You're allowed to touch them, you're allowed to take photographs, not Hitler. He is tucked away in a kind of a bunker, and also you're not allowed to take pictures of him. But here he is. We are in Berlin, so he's part of our history.
Today is September 11. That's why the flag is lowered.
Cobblestones, I don't know if you can see it. This is where the actual wall was. We are on the Death Strip, a strip between East and West Berlin. And just try to imagine, 28 years ago, there was nothing, really literally nothing. This was a death strip, and the whole area to the left and the whole area to the right used to be a wasteland. There was a campsite, you could walk your dog, there was a flea market on Sundays, and apart from that, this area was empty. And now it's the heart of Berlin, it's the new city center of Berlin. Look to the right, you can see 6 segments of the original wall. There are original wall segments. This is where the wall was. That means we will now drive back from East Berlin into West Berlin for a short moment. And we will actually drive across this double row of paving stones, of cobblestones. And you will notice with our coach, when we drive over it, there's a bit of a bump. So you can actually feel it. You can feel it. And that was the idea, to make people aware. If you ask anybody who is walking around here, where was the wall, where was the border, I can tell you no, nobody knows. They don't pay attention. More than half of the population living in Berlin nowadays never experienced the wall. They came to Berlin after the wall came down or were born afterwards. And even the old Berliners, for them, it's very, very difficult to trace the course of the wall. The wall zigzagged through town. So there are a lot of reminders, and yeah, that tries to keep that part of the history alive. Potsdamer Platz is a mixture of residential apartments, of shops, of offices. There are 2 movie centers, museums, basically everything you need for a city center. So when this whole area was redesigned after the wall came down, it was done very cleverly. Achtung! Oh, oh. Feel it? Oh,
Yeah.
another one. We've crossed the wall. That's it now. Now we are in West Berlin. Yeah, we carry on straight. And in Moscow with a little aeroplane, and that one is on display as well. Now you can see it again. 500,000 tons of groceries, 1 million tons of coal. a complete power plant, dismantled of course, was taken into Berlin by aeroplanes. The aeroplanes landed in a strict rhythm. They had a pattern when they how they had to do that. There were 3 air corridors, and they flew on 5 different levels. And the Berliners would help to unpack the aeroplanes for a free warm meal. On the left is again the canal, the Landwehrkanal, and next to it is the Berlin Underground. Now, if you look at the construction, you might say, well, isn't an underground supposed to run underground? Hence the name. Well, quite right, but Berlin is different. A good quarter of our underground network actually runs above ground. Why? Because of the difficult ground. The soil in Berlin, the ground is sandy and it is very wet. So it's very, very difficult to dig holes, to dig tunnels for the underground. And when the first underground was built at around 1900, it was just too expensive at the time. So what they did is they put the underground on stilts, but they still call it underground. Another thing I'm often asked by guests, you have seen and you will see more of these funny pipes. I can't see any at the moment, but you will see more of these funny blue pipes. Sometimes they are blue, sometimes they are pink, and they run for hundreds of meters. And these pipes serve the purpose of dewatering the ground. And if you follow these pipes, you will always see they start at a construction site and they end in a river or a canal or a manhole. So if you open up a construction site, that hole immediately fills up with water, which makes it impossible to lay out the foundation. So the ground has to be dewatered, the water has to be pumped away, and that happens through these blue pipes. And only after the foundation is completed, the pipes can be removed. Very, very complicated and very, very costly, of course.
And you can see the plug of him with his portrait. So here to the right. As you have seen in the film and heard, that Kennedy finished his speech, which was a historic speech. Everybody expected much from him because everybody was upset, not just in Berlin but around in the free world, that the Soviets put a wall. And the expectation was very high against the Americans, that they will act something, they will do something against the wall. First Lyndon B. Johnson came, but he couldn't do anything. That was a very high tension, and nearly they could have started another third World War. You heard about there was a standoff between the Soviet and American tanks at Checkpoint Charlie, and would have been needed one shot to start another war. So that was the culmination of the Cold War. But luckily never happened. 2 years later, when things a little bit consolidated, but the people were still very unhappy, Kennedy came himself to West Berlin. He landed on the Tempelhof Airport, and because Tempelhof Airport was used, it was a main airport, it was used by the American Air Force. And this area, Schöneberg, was in the territory of the American zone. So he was received by the Lord Mayor, Willy Brandt, who was a Lord Mayor of West Berlin that time, a Social Democrat.
Вот здесь я хочу дать небольшое пояснение, поскольку это видно Бранденбургские ворота, это тоже Бранденбургские ворота. Но вот следующее, вот эти все бетонные блоки, их 600 штук. Это мемориал Холокоста в Берлине. Нам очень повезло, его открыли за 3 месяца до того, как мы приехали. Это очень получилось удачно. Вот такие фото, вот такое вот интересное решение. Вот так художник или скульптор придумал. Не знаю, насколько это... Вот. Но, тем не менее, производит очень серьезное впечатление, особенно когда там бродишь внутри, и там не так просто разобраться, там надо ходить. Ты ходишь, и не сразу находишь выход. Это тоже довольно интересно сделано. Ну, вот такой мемориал, что сказать. Везде свое, как говорится, но очень производит такое моментальное, интересное впечатление. Вот видите, вот все вот эти вот... Они все совершенно разной высоты, длины. Они все совершенно разные. Все вот эти. Что интересно, что этот мемориал напротив нового американского посольства, которое вот в Берлине. Вот оно. Вот это посольство.
And just try to imagine 28 years ago there was nothing, really literally nothing. It was a death strip, and the whole area to the left and the whole area to the right used to be a wasteland. There was a campsite, you could walk your dog, there was a flea market on Sundays, and apart from that this area was empty. And now it's the heart of Berlin, it's the new city center of Berlin. Look to the right, you can see 6 segments of the original wall. There are original wall segments. This is where the wall was. That means we will now drive back from East Berlin into West Berlin for a short moment. And we will actually drive across this double row of paving stones, of cobblestones. And you will notice with our coach, when we drive over it, there's a bit of a bump. So you can actually feel it. You can feel it. And that was the idea, to make people aware. If you ask anybody who is walking around here, where was the wall, where was the border, I can tell you now, nobody knows. They don't pay attention. More than half of the population living in Berlin nowadays never experienced the wall. They came to Berlin after the wall came down or were born afterwards. And even the old Berliners, for them, it's very, very difficult to trace the course of the wall. The wall zigzagged through town. So there are a lot of reminders, and that tries to keep that part of the history alive. The building to the right is the Berlin Philharmonic Concert Hall, holding 2,500 people. The other one is the smaller Chamber Concert Hall. And they were built according to the line form follows function. So the function is a concert hall. And this is where the architecture looks a bit strange, but I can promise you the acoustics are outstanding. The orchestra is located in the middle of the building, and the audience sits around on different levels. That means you can see and you can hear excellent from every seat. At the moment is the Berlin Music Festival with a lot of well-known international orchestras playing here, and it's a real treat to be able to attend a classical concert in one of these concert halls. This whole area is the second cluster of museums. Remember, I told about these clusters we have here in Berlin. Here we have the main picture gallery with old master paintings, 1,500, amongst them a handful of Rembrandts. Then we have a arts and drafts museum, we have a musical instrument museum, and so on and so on. Main entrance to the Philharmonic Concert Hall is now on the right. We will turn left, but you can also have a look, please. You see there's a group of people standing, and behind it is a blue glass wall. We have many memorials in Berlin. This is one of the more recent ones that was opened about 2 or 3 years ago. And it commemorates that on this side where the memorial is to be found nowadays used to be an office building. And this office building along what would have happened if Stauffenberg would have been successful. He tried to kill Hitler to end the Second World War. The Second World War carried on for another 9 months, and in the last 9 months of the Second World War, the same number of people was killed than in the 5 years before. Just think of that. And what personally touches me always when I think about it is that Stauffenberg, the guy who did it, he was also a private man. He was married. He had a young wife. He had 4 little children. His wife, Nina, was, at the time he committed the assassination attempt, she was pregnant with a 5th child. She was taken to prison. The 4 children were taken away from her, put in an orphanage. She gave birth in prison to the last child. And she had to live. She died only about 10 years ago. She lived a very long life. She wrote a lot of books of what had happened, and he knew there was a high chance that he would die, but he did it anyway to save Germany and the lives of many other people. Yeah, inside this building is nowadays the German Resistant Memorial Center. So this is it's a museum, a documentation center that gives you all the information about his assassination attempt, but also about other resistance groups. My parents often speak about it still, and they say they thought that's it. This is the outbreak of the Third World War, which was luckily subsequently de-escalated. But otherwise, Checkpoint Charlie belongs to the tourists nowadays. So we will cross the checkpoint, and then we will see if we can either straight down the road or to the left find parking. Probably to the left is more legal. I'll leave that to the bus driver. And then you will have the possibility to get out of the coach, walk around here, and take some pictures of the checkpoint.
Yes. Tell them, do not let they stamp their passport, because it will invalidate their passport if you get this souvenir stamp.
Yes.
It will immediately invalidate the passport.
The parking is an issue. One thing Thomas mentions here now is what they do here at Checkpoint. They try to sell you all kinds of things. But there's no parking. There's no parking. Go straight. Yeah, let's go straight. So they also offer to stamp your passport with an old GDR stamp. Don't do that, because then your passport will be invalid. GDR doesn't exist anymore, so don't fall for that trick. Huh? Keep your passport safe with you. Yeah, we will stop here. That's not perfectly legal, but we will do it anyway. Should we just say 10 minutes? Is that fine? Yeah, you just 10 minutes, you walk over, take some pictures of the checkpoint, and then we proceed.
Jeder wollte sie zur Frau, doch ihr Herz war nicht mehr frei, denn sie hat nur einen geliebt. Doch der zog in den Krieg und er kehrte nicht mehr heim. Es gab nichts mehr, was ihr noch sang noch ihr Lied und sie kämmte noch ihr Haar, als das Boot schon versunken war. Lorelei, lei, lei, und der Wirder fließt herein, wie ein blaues Band durch das weite, schöne Land. Lorelei, lei, lei, dort im hellen Sonnenschein, kämmtest du dein goldenes Haar. Lorelei, lei, lei, Schiffe ziehen an dir vorbei, und man hört noch heut den Gesang aus alter Zeit. Lorelei, lei, lei, doch man sieht dich heut nicht mehr auf den steilen Felsen. Lorelei, lei, lei. Wie ein blaues Band durch das weite, schöne Land. Lorelei, lei, lei, du sitzt dort im Sonnenschein und du kämpfst dein
And again, it's becoming a bit of a competitor to Kurfürstendamm. There are many, many shops, not only coffee shops, but all kinds of shops, fashion shops as well. And the Galerie Lafayette, which is a French department store, has its branch here. Also, some upmarket fashion designers. Next one, we turn right, and you have to make a big curve. It's difficult, but it's possible. Yeah, next one to the right. And just had to speak to the bus driver because the next curve is a very, very difficult one, manageable but difficult, but worth going in there because that will take us best to Gendarmenmarkt and to a chocolate shop. I'm very happy that we are in Russia. We can't stop there, otherwise you would spend there the rest of the day, I can promise you now. But we will drive past that chocolate shop very slowly. It is a wonderful shop that has scale models of all Berlin sites on display in the windows, made out of genuine chocolate. And they sell about 250 different types of chocolate and truffles. They have a cafe, a restaurant, where you can order a 4-course set menu made out of chocolate creations. It's a really wonderful place. So I'm talking about the place ahead of us with the green awning where the taxis stand in front. We will drive very slowly, and depending on the light and the sunshine, you will be able to look inside the shop and you can see a few of these chocolate models. In the first window is it's difficult to say. It's Brandenburg Gate. The second one is the Reichstag, and there's the Emperor William Memorial Church. Yeah, unfortunately, it's very difficult to see now. The light is coming from the wrong direction, but it's a wonderful place, fully air conditioned, of course. So on a hot summer day, people just go in and inhale the scent of chocolate while outside is a sauna. Lovely place. But now, Gendarmenmarkt. To the left is the French cathedral, and you will see soon a church looking absolutely identical. A second church, and that is the German cathedral. So the Gendarmenmarkt comprises 2 churches, and in the middle is a concert hall. So why do we have a German and a French cathedral here in Berlin? Oopsie, difficult, but I'm sure we will manage. The reason is that not much has changed in the last 300 years, and already 300 years ago many refugees came to Berlin. 300 years ago they didn't come from Syria or from Africa, they came from the neighboring country France. They were Huguenots. They were persecuted for their religious belief, and they found rescue here in Berlin. And Berlin has always been a very liberal city, and the religious belief didn't really matter to anybody, so they were allowed to build. Huguenots were set up, and opposite another church for the Lutherans, for the German Protestants. And then very cleverly in the middle they built nowadays it's a concert hall, but it used to be a theater, so a place where 2 different groups, for both groups, could meet and talk to each other. Worked well at the time. And the square luckily survived the war, not too much damage, and nowadays it's one of our most beautiful squares in Berlin. Interesting enough, none of these 2 churches is used as a church anymore nowadays. The French cathedral houses a Huguenot museum and a restaurant, and the German cathedral houses a German history museum. Interesting might be also for you some figures about religion in Berlin. The rulers also were always shifting around. Some were Protestants, some were Calvinists, some were whatever, Lutherans. They didn't really care about religion. For them it was an instrument of power, but they didn't really care what religion their people had. So religious freedom is one of the attributes here in Berlin, but that led of course also to a high number of people who are not religious at all. And in numbers, today about 18% of the Berlin population are Protestants, about 8% are Catholics, and about 7% are Muslims. And that's it basically. So if you add these three numbers, you find out that about 2/3 of all Berliners are not affiliated to a religious belief whatsoever. And you can see the linden trees. This is the typical Berlin tree. About 1/3 of all trees are linden trees. And now we will drive very slowly, because now you will see amongst the construction cranes a few beautiful historical buildings, starting on the left with the State Library. Beautiful old building, about 120 years old. Recently the scaffolding was taken away, construction is almost completed, reconstruction. And then we have another equestrian statue here, and this is now Frederick II, Frederick the Great, the famous Prussian king, the grandson of Sophie Charlotte and Frederick from Charlottenburg. Remember, I told you about him this morning. He's riding home, and maybe we can stop here quickly, maybe behind that red coach, just for a few seconds, and I have a bit more time to talk. Frederick the Great is positioned here because he commissioned all the buildings that you can see. Let's start with the left building. The Neptune fountain used to be placed in one of the courtyards of the old city palace, and you see the TV tower. Another landmark of Berlin, of course, is our town hall ahead of us to the left. It is called the Red Town Hall for its red color. We have actually three governments in Berlin. It's a bit complicated. So we have the government of the Federal Republic of Germany, which is the Reichstag and the Chancellery. Berlin is a city, so the city government, the mayor, has its seat in the Red Town Hall. But also Berlin is a federal state of Germany, so there's another third parliament, which I will leave out now to not to confuse you too much. Straight. Okay, now you can drive a bit faster. Yeah, so this is the heart of the historical part of Berlin, and that of course leads to the question, when I say historical, how old is Berlin? I would love to answer that question, but I can't. And it's not a lack of knowledge from my side. The reason is we don't know. There is no founding charter, there is no proper documentation. If there was such a document, it got lost in the war. The only thing I can tell you is that one of the buildings ahead of us to the right was recently completed, and there was a gap, a hole from a bombing during the Second World War. And before they could put up the building, they of course had to excavate the ground for the foundation, and they came across a wall of a former building. And of course that immediately alerts the archaeologists, and they came. I'm talking about the building here to the right now. This is a brand new building. So on the right here, some excavation work then was carried out, and they not only found walls of an old building, they also found the skeleton.
Здесь тоже попробую дать небольшие пояснения. Вот это Берлинская опера. Вот Министерство иностранных дел Германии. Старое здание. Вот это вот скульптура, которая стоит на берегу как бы. Вот. И это другая скульптура с другого берега. Это не памятник, это просто украшение моста. Вот. Тут что-то связанное с Самсунгом, по-видимому. Не уверен, не знаю, не могу сказать точно. Это одна из церквей, которых в Берлине великое множество. И вот самое главное, то, к чему я пытался вот это все и начало. Это куски Берлинской стены бывшей. Они все раскрашены, перекрашены, их просто куча, огромные куски, все, сколько там, что там только не написано. И какого не только то самое, не бывает размера и веса, как их привезли, тоже большой вопрос.
Back to Berlin from time to time and renew their painting. The original painting is more than 25 years old. And here you can see the wall. You can see 3.6 meters, about 12 feet high, and the coping, the barrier on top to prevent people from hooking onto it. There's an interesting painting of the wall breaking open ahead of us and people flooding through. That was done by an artist from Iran. He lived at Checkpoint Charlie on the West Berlin side, and this is what he observed when the people for the first time came through the wall. Another interesting mural is coming up on the right, a GDR car, a Trabi, a Trabant. So these were these tiny little cars made out of not cardboard but resin reinforced with cotton waste. And you know, it's a very fragile, soft material. The artist, she's a woman from East Berlin, she painted this car breaking through the concrete. I like that very much. Also very interesting, the colorful heads that you can see now to the right, they were done by Thierry Noir. Thierry Noir is a French artist and he lived in West Berlin or before the wall came down. And you might know that people illegally painted on the western side of the wall already before it came down. But the wall was property of the GDR, it was located on GDR territory. So if you did that, you actually committed a crime and you could be fined, you could be arrested. So it was very dangerous to do that. So this is where he developed his technique of these colorful heads. He was saying, I just painted a quick outline, filled it with color, and then I had to run away to get away quickly before they could arrest me. Okay, we need to make a U-turn. So go a bit further, not here, but the next one. You make a U-turn, then we come back. Yeah. Don't go to the traffic, to the last traffic light. That is too far. There you can't turn. The one before is a possibility. If you can't do a U-turn, then I will show you a way around the buildings, but preferably a U-turn. Here to the right, even Nelson Mandela made it on the wall. Interesting that Nelson Mandela was in South Africa, released more or less at the same time when in Berlin the wall came down. It was the end of the Cold War. And that led also to the downfall of the apartheid system in South Africa. The most famous mural is coming up to the right now. Now you must look to the right. Behind this pink truck, you see Brezhnev and Honecker, two old guys kissing each other. How disgusting is this? But the artist took an original photograph and he painted the photograph onto the wall. Yeah, please try to do what he does. So Brezhnev and Honecker, Brezhnev the head of state of the Soviet Union, Honecker of the GDR, the German Democratic Republic, and when these two communist statesmen met, they actually hugged and kissed each other. Please look also to the right. There is a brownish building and it reads Pirates Berlin. And on top of the building you can see still an original watchtower. There were about 300 watchtowers along the Berlin Wall. About 3 or 4 are still in place, and this is one of the last remaining original ones. So on top of this building, 2 GDR border sentries were placed. They always had to work in pairs to control, to check on each other, and they would monitor the death strip. And the death strip in this case was the other side of the wall. So the GDR desperately tried to convince their own people not to leave the country, to stay in the East. And they would tease them by saying, look what beautiful apartments you will get. You get them for a very cheap rent. This is what we do. We look after you, we provide you with a beautiful building. These apartments all had central heating, they all had a lift, they are very nicely equipped. They all have a rubbish chute, for example, so you don't have to take your rubbish down to a bin in the courtyard. There's a little hole next to an entrance where you can get rid of the rubbish. Very modern architecture for the time. But of course the downside is very expensive, and only a short section of a few hundred meters was actually built in that expensive, luxurious style, and then the GDR ran out of money and stopped it again. What you see now to the left and to the right are blocks. They are younger. To the left used to be a big park in the beginning of the GDR, and in the middle of the park was an enormous statue of Stalin, the Russian dictator. He was admired in the GDR. But after he died in '53, most of the people in GDR also found out what kind of personality he was, and that he probably killed more people than Hitler. So the statue was removed, and also the street was renamed. In the beginning, the name of the street used to be Stalin Avenue, but then it became Karl Marx Avenue. A few more of these beautiful buildings, and to show you that they really put a lot of effort in. The facade is not just clay or 2 years of the GDR, not later on, but in the beginning there was a good thought, let's put it like that. So and now you can see literally how the GDR ran out of money in the 50s. No porcelain tiles here anymore. You can see these are ordinary clay tiles. And if you look at the bigger, the higher buildings, apartment blocks ahead of us, at the end of the square here, they have no tiles at all. That was it. There was no money left for more tiles. That's just plaster. And also this square here is the end of the expensive architecture. And now we're talking about the year 1956, and the GDR shifted to a different architectural style, the Plattenbauten. And those Plattenbauten, those precast concrete blocks you can see ahead of us, they are also worth having a look at because they are the role models. They were the first ones that were created. And believe me, the GDR put a lot of effort in these as well. They are very symmetrical, and the way they planned them with the whole infrastructure around. So there would be schools and kindergartens behind. There are a lot of parks. It's very green. And this section between here and Alexanderplatz, the TV tower, gave apartments housing for 15,000 people, and it was put up within 3-4 years. So it is quite an achievement. If we like it, if we find it beautiful, that's another thing we can debate. But at least this is the ideal of GDR architecture. They also use these modest colors, typical colors. They are all renovated, reconstructed to the original style. So this is what the GDR looked like in a nutshell. And you can
a sculpture like a Pieta. It's a beautiful, very moving monument of the war. A woman holding a dying son, like a Pieta. That's wonderful, from the sculptor Käthe Kollwitz. And this is the book, second-hand book market before the Humboldt University. The two Humboldt brothers statue are here, with both of them explorers and scientists were. On the left-hand side, this building with the columns is the university library. And here on the left-hand side, under the pavement, is a very interesting monument dedicated to the book burning. There is the cover is glass. You can look down underground, and in the basement you see empty bookshelves, nothing else. This is symbolizing the void, the disappearance of the culture, because so many genius books were burnt here by the Nazis. To the left, this is the main thoroughfare of the old town. Look to the left, the Friedrichstrasse, which starts from the right, from the train station, which was also a border point between east and west. And on the other end is the Checkpoint Charlie, the formal entrance to the American sector. Now again crossing the Tiergarten, this hunting park, and in front of us is the Victory Column. Few people know that the Victory Column was not here originally, but before the Reichstag building, and then later was moved here. Here on the left you see statues of two generals, left and right, Prussian generals of the army. Now we're going to go through the west-east axis. This is where the most of the demonstrations, the army parades, took place. This is crossing in an east-west direction the whole huge park linking Charlottenburg with the Brandenburg Gate. Actually, from here now we're running toward the Brandenburg Gate. And behind the Brandenburg Gate, you see on the left-hand side the bowl of the television tower. Actually, this television tower, which is still the highest building of Germany, was built during the DDR, during the communist Germany. And it was standing in the middle of East Berlin, the communist Berlin. There is a fast elevator taking you up to the revolving restaurant. Of course, you have the best view in this flat country, in this flat city. Shouting toward the Brandenburg Gate. This is also symbolic because during the days of the division, when the two cities was divided from each other, the West Berliners could stand at this point. They couldn't get any closer to the Brandenburg Gate, and for them they built a small stage out of wood so they can stand on it and give some signals, or you looking through a looking glass. And on the other side of the gate, which was the Soviet territory, their relatives from East Berlin may have answered to them, giving signals, but they couldn't meet. Look on the left-hand side. This is the shouting person. But this place was when Ronald Reagan started to agitate Gorbachev before the wall came down, and there was a big stage here built for these politicians, and the press were, and Gorbachev was also here, and Reagan was giving here the invitation. So Mr. Gorbachev, come down, open this gate to the freedom, and tear down the wall. That's the famous words were said here. On the left-hand side, beyond the last grayish boss, there is a commemorating plug of these famous sentences, famous speech of Reagan. And we come back here tonight. You'll see more. And this is the famous Brandenburg Gate.
passiert nun die Mühlendammschleuse. Mit ihrer Hilfe überwinden Schiffe den Höhenunterschied von etwa 1,60 Meter zwischen der Unter- und der Oberspree. Es geht jetzt nicht weiter spreeaufwärts oder zu Berg, wie es in der Schifffahrt heißt. Unser Schiff landet hier. Wir möchten allerdings noch den alten historischen Hafen erwähnen, der sich hinter der Schleuse befindet. Größtenteils sind Brückenbauten aus der DDR-Zeit. Hier verwendete man allerdings kleinteilige, abwechslungsreiche Formate und spitze Linien historischen Gebäudes stilistisch nachzuempfinden. Weitere Beispiele für diese Versuche Brückenbauten stehen am Gendarmenmarkt und in der Büsselstraße. Das auffälligste Gebäude der Häuserfront ist das Kurfürstenhaus aus rotem Sandstein, das aus dem Westerhof erbaut wurde. Das Haus ist eines der wenigen erhaltenen alten Bauwerke des Nikolaiviertels. Gerade an dieser Stelle wird einem bewusst, dass etwa 60% der Stadt nach dem Krieg zerstört waren. Mehr als 500 Jahre lang stand hier das Hauptstadtschloss der Hohenzollern, die Residenz der brandenburgischen Kurfürsten, der späteren preußischen Könige und schließlich der deutschen Kaiser. Man könnte sagen, hier stand der Bildgläubiger. Heute befinden sich in der Parkanlage des Ortsspielstätten und Freikirchen. Selbst die Brücke vor uns trägt den Namen des verschwundenen Schlosses Nordischen Brücke. Sie verbindet die Spitze der Residenzinsel mit dem Spielufer. Sehen Sie ein rotes Deckgebäude, das ist ein Deutschen Parlamentarischen Gesellschaft. Der Neubau rechts mit zum Wasser gewandter Freitreppe ist nach der früheren Reichstagsabgeordneten Marie-Elisabeth Lüders benannt. Die erste Frau, die an einer deutschen Universität den Doktortitel erwarb. Das Gebäude ist Sitz der Parlamentsbibliothek, weltweit die drittgrößte nach dem Washington und Tokio. Die große Skulptur auf dem dritten Absatz ist ein Werk von Martin Marino, der für seine sich aufbauenden Pferde und Stützen Zentrum des Regierungsviertels ist das Reichstagsgebäude, heute Sitz des Bundestages. Die neue untere gläserne Kuppel ist ein Entwurf des britischen Architekten. Architektur spiegelt die Geschichte und verändert sich mit ihr. Denn dies ist eine Stadt der Kontraste. Gerade deshalb ist sie auch wieder eine beliebte Kulisse für Filmproduktionen geworden. Hier finden Regisseure die unterschiedlichsten Drehorte. Hollywood macht aus der Karl-Marx-Allee Moskau, verlegt den Gendarmenmarkt nach London und durch das Gestänge der Eisenbahnbrücke hier am Bahnhof Friedrichstraße entkommen halsbrecherisch klettern CIA-Agenten ihren Verfolgern, zumindest auf der Leinwand. Gemächlicher geht es da am Schiffbauerdamm zu. In den zahllosen Restaurants und Cafés entlang der linken Spreeseite sitzen die Menschen im Sommer entspannt direkt am Ufer. Mit Blick auf den Bahnhof Friedrichstraße, den ehemaligen Grenzübergang, auf den Tränenpalast und imposante neue Architektur am Spreedreieck. Wer schon einmal hier ist, sollte auch unbedingt eines der zahlreichen...
Бывший вокзал
Die
Фридрихштрассе.
Auswahl ist groß. Wir empfehlen den Besuch der mit jährlich über 700.000 Besuchern meistbesuchten Bühne Berlins. Über 160 Mitwirkende pro Vorstellung, davon mehr als 100 Künstler und Künstlerinnen, fantastische Kostüme, die für die aktuelle Show The One Grand Show kein geringerer als Jean-Paul Gaultier entworfen hat. Atemberaubende Artistik und die wohl 64 schönsten Beine der Welt in der berühmten Girl-Reihe erwarten die Besucher hier. Nutzen Sie doch einen Besuch des Friedrichstadtpalastes Ihre Grundkarte und sparen 20%. Über die Steinkonstruktion der Baden-Brücke führt die bekannte Friedrichstraße. Die beliebte Einkaufsmeile und mit zahlreichen gehobenen Geschäften zusammen mit den Brüdern ist hier eine der gefährlichsten Gegenden Berlins. Für Ihren Kontostand.
Чё это у них там так забито, прям места нет. Страшное дело. У нас такого нет, ажиотажа. Есть народ, но не настолько. Выдают.
Und der Kupfergraben. Durchgehend schiffbar ist nur der von uns aus gesehen linke Spreearm. Der rechte Spreearm ist für große Schiffe nicht befahrbar. Nun können Sie den Berliner Fernsehturm mit seiner markanten Kugel sehen, in der sich ein drehendes Restaurant versteckt. Wenn Sie dort Ihre Tasche auf der Fensterbank ablegen, sehen Sie sie erst eine halbe Stunde später wieder. So lange braucht die Kugel für eine Umdrehung. Der Berliner Fernsehturm ist mit 378 Metern das höchste Bauwerk Deutschlands. Der 360-Grad-Blick von oben schlicht atemberaubend. Mit dem Bau des Fernsehturms wollte die DDR-Regierung damals im Stadtzentrum ein weithin sichtbares symbolisches Zeichen setzen.
Метро едет.
cha, grr ha ha, grr boom ba, grr ha ha. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. Mulungu ni mulandi ha ha na na. Hambana kukanela sha la la la. Mulungu ni mulandi ha ha na na. Hambana kukanela sha la la la. Wena na mina ha ha na na. Hambana kukanela sha la la la. Wena na mina ha ha na na. Hambana kukanela sha la la la. Hey, wakiruda yuda, mulungu hapana na. Wakiridi, wakiruda yuda, mula mula na wena. Hey, wakiruda yuda, mulungu hapana na. Wakiridi. afanana ambana kukanela shalalala mulunguni mulandi afanana ambana kukanela shalalala wena na mina afanana ambana kukanela shalalala wena na mina afanana ambana kukanela shalalala hey wakida yuda mulungu afanana wakidi wakida yuda bula bula na wena wakiludayuda mulungu afanana wakidi wakiludayuda bula bula na wena mulunguni mulandi afanana ambana kukanela shalalala mulunguni mulandi afanana ambana kukanela shalalala wena na mina afanana ambana kukanela shalalala wena na mina afanana ambana kukanela shalalala
ГДРовская кухонька. Вот так вот они жили. Вот тут у них... Что у них там? Непонятно, чего это такое. Сейчас... Не понял. Ну, не важно, ладно. Вот это раковина. Вот их все принадлежности. Там какие-то хрен поймет. О, плита импортная, ГДРовская. Не как-нибудь. Сейчас посмотрим, что тут. Какая-то хрень непонятная. Не знаю, ладно. Вот такой вот. Похоже явно на российские дела. Это все от Гитлера осталось, скорее всего. Или дедушка из Гжели привез. Вот их не ливинг-рум типа. Там из кухни можно было прям подавать через окошко. Вот пишущая машинка, мечта народов СССР. Как? Это же Эрика. Ох ты, господи, боже ж мой. Эрика, это же мечта была. Вот это вот торшер, типа, что-нибудь такое. Вот, видите? Вот, стенка Хельга. Такая была. Вот. Сейчас посмотрим, что за телевизор. Не похоже на русский. Непонятно, что за телевизор. Ну, хрен с ним. Вот тут такие чашечки, все это. Все такое вот.
לבלבו אגס וגם תפוח, ערפילים כיסו את הנהר, וקטיושקה אז יצא לסוח, אל חוף טל ונהדר, וקטיושקה אז יצא לסוח,
תפוח, ערפילים כיסו את הנהר.
וקטיושקה אז יצא לסוח אל החוף תלול ונהדר. וקטיושקה אז יצא לסוח אל החוף תלול ונהדר. לבלבו אגס וגם תפוח, ערפילים כיסו את הנהר. וקטיושקה אז יצא לסוח אל החוף תלול ונהדר. וקטיושקה אז יצא לסוח אל החוף תלול ונהדר.
לבלבו אגס וגם תפוח, ערפילים כיסו את הנהר.
וקטיושקה אז יצא לסוח אל החוף תלול ונהדר. וקטיושקה אז יצא לסוח אל החוף תלול ונהדר. לבלבו אגס וגם תפוח, ערפילים כיסו את הנהר. וקטיושקה אז יצא לסוח אל החוף תלול ונהדר. וקטיושקה אז יצא לסוח אל החוף תלול ונהדר.
Wait a second. I didn't do it. Wait a second. Say freedom again. Freedom video. This is the western side. Квадриго. Вот вся группа Томашевские. Oh, wow. Вот здесь стояла стена берлинская. Вот стена была.
Это двойные камни.
Well, yes, the armory, that's Polestars.
Вот ее, вот прямо остатки вот этой стены. О. Ань, наступи на стену. Ничего, никого нет, машин нет. Наступи. Наступи.
Пошли.
О, красота. Пошли дальше. Все годится.
Let's try that again. I'm trying.
Нас ждут, ну пожалуйста.
Ну идем. Все спокойно.
Повернись еще раз на ворота.
Сейчас. Вот ворота. Вот ворота.
Тут я тоже попробую внести свои 5 копеек, как говорят. Это вот Бранденбургские ворота. Вот это вот место, где была стена берлинская. Вот еще один вид на Бранденбургские ворота. Немножко с другой стороны. Как бы. Вот это вид сквозь Бранденбургские ворота. Можно так сказать. Сквозь одну из воротин. Вон Аня стоит в темноте. Но узнать ее можно, тем не менее. Это тоже она вот она подняла руки, вот это тоже Бранденбургские ворота. И вот сейчас будет вид на эту 4 коней, которые стоят сверху на воротах этих бранденбургских. И вот это я, не поверите, тоже в Бранденбургских воротах. Можно узнать? Нет, не знаю. Это опять вид наверх, опять эти самые кони. Ну что, вот Анина нога стоит на месте, где когда-то была стена. Берлинская, естественно. Вот это вот они все оставили. Везде, где была стена в Берлине, вот так вот эти камни, они так и остались. Они так и тянутся через весь город. Специально так сделано. Вот тоже это в разных местах снято, тем не менее, вот это место, где была стена. Это знаменитый Потсдамер плац в Берлине. Это вокзал, откуда поезда уходят. Вот. Мы не ездили. Вот тоже куски стены стоят возле вокзала, если вот вы увидите. Вот. Ну, что сказать. Самое большое впечатление от этого дня было, когда мы все взялись за руки и бежали через Бранденбургские ворота насквозь. Именно бежали. И кричали «Freedom». Кричали «Freedom» почему-то по-английски, а не по-немецки. Но, тем не менее, вот так вот это вот было. Вот такая история.